To make this lovely loaf of rustic bread, you need only 5 basic ingredients. You'll need 4 cups of white flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of a good quality instant yeast, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 cups of water. You'll also need a large mixing bowl, and you'll need a large pot with a lid to bake it in. The first step is to proof your yeast. And proofing yeast is taking your salt and your sugar and your yeast and adding it into a cup, and then adding 2/3 of a cup of warm water. What proofing is doing is it's waking up the yeast. The sugar and the salt feed the yeast, and you put this aside for about 5 minutes, and you should be able to see that the yeast is alive and active. We've been proofing the yeast, and now I'm just stirring it all together to make sure that the sugar and the salt has dissolved, and the yeast is looking as though it is very happy and very active, so we're ready to start making our bread. In my mixing bowl, I have 4 cups of a good quality all-purpose flour, to which I am now going to add my yeast mixture and an additional 1.5 cups of water, of warm water. And with my rubber spatula, I'm going to mix this all together as I form a soft dough. When I was taking baking classes in France, one of the things that I was told is that as an American, I would never, ever produce a good loaf of bread, because in America, we don't have the right kind of flour. We certainly don't have the right kind of yeast, in their opinion, and we certainly don't have the right kind of oven. So making a proper French bread is a challenge, but that doesn't mean you can't make a perfectly good and satisfying loaf of bread on your own. I'm lightly flouring my board. Now I'm going to turn my dough out onto my board. This is a bit of a sticky dough, so you want to have some extra flour handy. And we're going to form this into a manageable ball. You can tell we're going to need to add a little bit more flour there. It's a little stickier than I like. And then with my wonderful scraper, I'm going to start just flipping it around on my board, adding more flour as I need. This is all by feel. There's no proportions, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. This is just totally by feel. You can see how sticky it still is, but my ball is starting to form, but I still need a little more flour. So it'll take a few minutes. Today where I am, it's a little bit overcast and cold, so I've actually warmed my oven, and once my dough is ready, I'm going to cover it and put it in my oven to rise for the rest of the process. And a lot of the rising time will depend on where you live. We live at sea level, so things take a little longer for us. You'll have to learn to adjust your own baking technique to your own altitude. So you can see this is coming into a nice ball. Still a little sticky, but I think we've got that where we want it. And once I have it formed into a ball, I'm going to put the ball into a mixing bowl that I've coated with a vegetable spray. And I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap, and we'll take a look at this in about 3 hours. It will probably take 5 for me at sea level, but we'll look at 3. Our bread has been sitting at room temperature for 3 hours, and we're just taking a peek. It's not quite ready. For me, it's going to take the full 5 hours, so I'm going to recover it, and we will look again at 5 hours. It's been 5 hours, and here's our beautiful risen dough. I can tell this is going to be really sticky, but now it's time to turn it out on a floured breadboard and form it into a ball and get it ready for the oven. So I've lightly floured my breadboard, and I'm going to, with my rubber spatula, I'm going to start taking the very sticky dough out of the bowl. There's no real explanation as to why it decided to be extra sticky today, but we'll take care of that in this next step. So once it's on the board, we'll start adding flour as we start forming it into a ball, and the stickiness will go away. So using my scraper, handy little scraper, I'm just going to scrape and turn, and the more I work with the dough, the less sticky it becomes. And you can already see it starting to change, and it doesn't have that sticky characteristic anymore, and it's forming into a really beautiful, smooth, elastic ball. Now, I preheated our oven to 425, and I put our pot in the oven to preheat. We've got this beautiful smooth ball, and I'm moving this using my scraper onto a piece of parchment paper. The next step is to get my very hot pan out of the oven, put my bread into the pan, and then put it in the oven to bake. So I've just taken my preheated pot out of the oven, preheating at 425. I'm very carefully putting my bread into the pan because it's very hot. This needs to be covered, and it'll go back in the 425-degree oven for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, I'll remove the lid to let the bread brown, and then the bread will be finished.